Today I'm going to be talking about Aggro Demon Hunter in the newly released Scholomance expansion. This deck is mostly fueled by the printing of the two cards, Vicarious Reader and Glide. I'm going to talk about how those cards make this deck possible, but first let's take a look at the core cards. So these core cards can really be split up into 3 or 4 groups. You have this plan. There's really two main groups of cards that kind of make the meat of this deck. You have this attack plan that's going to use your hero power with Battle Fiend, Twin Slice, Umberwing, Satyr Overseer, and Glavebond Adept. These are cards that work very well with your hero power, and you'll want to be hero powering quite a bit, especially later on in the game when you're trying to finish it up. So just having these cards on the field are just going to do better, and of course cards like Umberwing just kind of make your hero power better. So that's like your first group of cards that's probably going to go into every list that you make of this deck. The second group of cards is going to be your Bone Chewer Brawler plan. So this is Bone Chewer Brawler, Guardian Og Merchant, and Beaming Sidekick. These 3 cards really synergize well, especially these 2 cards, Beaming Sidekick and Guardian Og Merchant, work really well with Bone Chewer Brawler. In addition, these cards are just generally good on their own. Guardian Og Merchant can get you value if your opponent has a bunch of board clears. Divine Shield is very powerful, or it can also remove some of your opponent's small minions. Beaming Sidekick can not only put +2 health on a Bone Chewer Brawler, but also on a Battle Fiend or just another minion on the field, make your minions quite a bit stickier. And then the 2 cards that really make this deck come together, you have Vicarious Reader and Glide. Vicarious Reader, of course, reads at the end of your turn, draw until you have 3 cards in hand. This is kind of like an upgraded Jeeves. If you remember, Jeeves from an older expansion cost 4 mana for a similar effect, except it was symmetrical and also helped your opponent out quite a bit more. This card is a lot stronger than Jeeves. So essentially this card allows you to play a deck with a bunch of 1-drops or a bunch of very low mana curve in order to throw away your hand and then play this card, draw 3 cards, and then play out your hand again, draw 3 more cards, and just beat your opponent to death like that. The problem with strategies like this is they often get overwhelmed by strategies that run a bunch of board wipes and win off of just general card advantage with long game control decks. And so when we look at the Glide really just solves the problem of not needing to worry about, control decks gaining such a large card advantage. And Glide not only does that, but also serves as another copy of Vicarious Reader, where you can run out of cards in your hand and then play out Glide. So most of the time you're going to be playing out Glide when you're top decking, when you've run out of cards completely and you just need 4 more to refill and go on. Usually that happens on turns like 3 and 4, so Glide is very important here. And then I have a couple more cards that I've included in the core list, namely Demon Companion, and I think that's actually the only other card. Demon Companion is probably the most powerful 1-drops ever printed, besides maybe pre-nerf Undertaker. This card is just nuts. Any of the 3 options are pretty insane. So now I'm going to look at a couple of deck lists. This is the first deck list and the one that was got to #1 legend in China. You're running 16 total 1-drops, super aggressive. Of course, you have all of your core cards here. Mana Burn is your first notable inclusion. This card is very powerful as a tempo play where you play out a couple of cards and then also mana burn so your opponent doesn't have enough mana either to tempo their own board and create more power on their side of the board or remove yours via a board wipe or removal, and then they spend their turn doing close to nothing and then you do a lot more. So mana burn is super powerful, especially in this kind of list. True Aim Crescent is an interesting card. When I played this list, I didn't really care for True Aim Crescent. It's good in some matchups where you have to clear a taunt, and it also gives your minions rush. So I see where in cases it can be useful. It also combos really well with Bone Chewer Brawler and Ace Hunter Kreen, which I'll get to in just a moment. So there is a lot of synergy with this card. I just found a lot of times it acts as a Light's Justice, where it's just 4 damage for 1 mana, which is still a good rate. Just over 4 turns, it's not the best. And often I would just replace with an Umberwing. Maybe I'm just bad at using this card and I don't understand how you're supposed to use it yet, but I've been mostly disappointed with True Aim Crescent. Now Ace Hunter Kreen, when I initially looked at this card, I thought it was more of a win more card where essentially you already have a big enough board to win the game. You play this card to solidify the fact that you have won the game. I think I'm mistaken. This card is very powerful on a board where you're full of minions, and especially when you have an equal or slightly lesser board state, you can use this card to make powerful trades, because like your characters aren't taking any damage, and you can use it with your hero power to take care of large minions without actually taking any damage. So I've been surprised how many times this card has been very useful. Kaiyun Sunfury, of course, kind of fits the deck if you're familiar with Tempo Demon Hunter. A lot of these cards are like the early game of Tempo Demon Hunter, and Kaiyun is like one of, besides Glavebound, is one of the only cards that kind of fills in the late game. This card is really good, especially if your opponent's going to play out a bunch of taunts and you're very close to killing them. You can top deck a Kaiyun K-Unit or Glide or Voracious Reader into a K-Unit and then win the game like that. Not only is it 4 mana 3 damage, but it's usually a lot more because it goes through their taunts. Very powerful card, very good at closing out the game. So that's it for this list. This was the original list, and so I've kind of tweaked this a little bit to what I've been playing. Recently I've been playing this list and it's a little bit slower. It's more mid-rangey and less aggressive. The reason I've done this is because you're still able to play out most of these cards and get value out of Voracious Reader and Glide. It's just a little slower in order to deal with a lot of the aggro decks that have been going around. One thing I will mention, the previous list that I've been playing is probably the fastest aggro deck in the format possible, but because of that, it often runs out of steam and actually gets outvalued by a lot of other aggro decks, especially the Paladin Libram Paladin that's been running around still from last meta. A lot of people have been using similar lists and a couple of the new cards to create super powerful lists that are still really good. That deck is really good right now. This list that I've been running is a little different. I've excluded Mana Burn and I think one other 1-drop in favor of playing an Altruist. Altruist is probably the big inclusion. You know, I felt with a lot of 1-drops and a lot of drawing into 1-drops, playing an Altruist on 5 or 6 is super valuable against all the aggro decks that are running around right now. The meta at the moment, as of recording this, is very hyper aggro. So Altruist is hopefully going to be an answer to that. Same with I-Beam. I thought it was kind of strange, you know, thinking about putting removal in, and I-Beam is a card I have been a little suspicious of. I've been keeping my eye on it, and it's very possible that I will remove I-Beam from this list, but I felt like it was a really good inclusion just for more tempo play. You know, you get this for 1 mana, and since you have very little cards in hand, you're going to get it for Outcast almost every single time. I-Beam is very good at clearing away some of your opponent's minions so they can't trade into your minions, and you can play out more. It kind of holds the same role as Mana Burn, except it's a little more reactive rather than proactive. The reason being is that I found that Mana Burn wasn't super effective all of the time. Usually they can either go ahead and play out their minions, especially with the Druid deck lying around. They can go Innervate and the new 0 mana, the new Innervate. So yeah, this is the list that I'm playing with. I also have another Amani Berserker for more combos with Bone Chewer Brawler along with Guardian Og Merchant and Beaming Sidekick. So this is the list I've been playing with. It's a little bit slower again than the previous list, but I think it's still fast enough to have a chance in this format. You still get enough value out of Voracious Reader. Here's a list that I really want to experiment with, and I haven't got to play any games with this list so far. This list has completely cut out the Bone Chewer Brawler plan and instead kind of picks up this token plan. We have Feast of Souls, which was in the token Demon Hunter list from last season, along with Azura Horror and Coordinated Strike. Oh, and I've also got Wraith Naga, and I've got Mage Hunter here. Just Mage Hunter is kind of a placeholder card at the moment. I don't know exactly what else to put in that slot, and I'm thinking of putting in another 1-drop. I'm not sure what yet, though. This is a list, again, that I haven't got to play around with. I really like the look of it. It's a lot more mid-rangey and a lot more value-centric, and hopefully is good enough against, you know, with Coordinated Strike and Wraith Nava, very good against the aggro decks that have been running around. The only thing is, this curve is a little on the high end for a card like Voracious Reader, and it's possible that I cut Voracious Reader in order for this to become more tempo-y and more token-esque, so I'll see what I end up doing with this list after I play a few games with it. So this is my mulligan guide, mainly for the first 2 decks. I didn't really include the 3rd deck because I haven't really got to play with it yet. So these numbers with 2 you should probably keep unconditionally. These are cards that you want in every opening hand. Of course, your Battle Fiend, Blazing Battle Mage, Demon Companion, Mana Burn, Bone Chewer Brawler, Umberwing, Voracious Reader. All of these, but Voracious Reader, have one thing in common. They're super aggressive and part of your cheap threats. Interesting exclusion is Satyr Overseer. You would often keep Satyr Overseer in Tempo Demon Hunter, but Satyr Overseer proves to be a little too slow in this list, so I found that keeping him is usually not worth your time. And then I have a couple things here that are conditional keeps. Beaming Sidekick and Guardian Og Merchant you can keep, but I would really only keep them with a Bone Chewer Brawler or Amani Berserker. And Glide is a conditional keep. You should keep Glide if you are playing against what you know to be a control deck. So Priest and Warrior are really the only classes I would consider keeping Glide. As for the metagame and if this deck will really see a bunch of play, I think if the metagame stays with a bunch of aggressive decks early on in the format, I don't think this deck will be very good. Glide just doesn't work very well with against aggressive strategies. It's very hard to maneuver Glide and cast it when you want it without the outcast costs. That means you have to have like 2 other cards in your hand, and it's really weird. You don't really want to be doing that with Glide. You want to be casting Glide by its own with you shuffling away no cards. Your opponent, though, if your opponent has emptied out their hand, you casting Glide is detrimental to yourself rather than them because you've played 4 mana for them to draw more cards, and they're going to gain tempo off of this. So it is possible that if the meta stays super aggressive, this deck won't be very viable, but if more controlling strategies come out, this will be the deck that just crushes controlling strategies. You know, if a lot of aggressive cards get nerfed very early on in this meta, this deck could come back, assuming one of the nerfs is not Voracious Reader. I believe it will be. This card will probably be pushed up to 3 mana at least. We'll kind of see where this takes us. But yeah, that's all I have today. I just want to say as a general remark, I'm kind of sorry for not posting. I've been going through a lot of stress stuff at work and getting things together. If you have been following me on some other social medias, you would know that I have been publishing some articles that you can read in the description. I'm going to link them. I've published 2 as of the release of this, as of the recording of this video, and I may be releasing a 3rd afterwards. So feel free to check those links out and check our website, Ace Gaming Guides. I've also opened up a little Discord, so hopefully you can join the Discord if you want to ask me some serious questions, or if you have some video ideas. Hop in that Discord, tell them to me. I'll have it open most of the day, so it's your direct line of communication with me. So I'm going to keep that open, and we'll see how that goes. But anyhow, thanks for watching. If you stuck along this far, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, that's about it.